The movie is structured around three distinct stories, each centered on a different kingdom and its powerful king. The first story transports us to the kingdom of Long Trellis, where the king and queen are seated on their thrones, watching a circus performance. Despite the cheers of the crowd, the queen watches with a sad and bored expression. Later, during another performance, one of the performers opens her cloak, revealing her pregnant belly to the audience. The sight overwhelms the queen with jealousy, and she quickly retreats to her chamber, where she begins smashing objects in frustration. Soon after, the king enters, embraces his wife tenderly, and promises to do whatever it takes to resolve her predicament. It is revealed that the queen is suffering from an extremely rare medical condition, which prevents her from bearing children. Seeing his wife in such sorrow, the king summons the best doctors and physicians from distant lands, but to no avail. None can identify the mysterious ailment. Under the cover of night, a sorcerer in a black robe arrives at the castle and calls the royal family for an audience, claiming he can solve the queen's infertility problem. This leaves the royal couple stunned, but the king reminds him that many have tried before and failed. The sorcerer, however, is adamant that the queen can bear a child, though it depends on how far the king is willing to go for his queen. The king responds that he is willing to go to any extent. The sorcerer reveals that, through his years of experience and vast knowledge of nature, he knows that nature must always remain in balance. He explains that if someone desires a life, they must sacrifice one in return. The king and queen are both fascinated and horrified by his words. Yet, despite the sorcerer's strange claims, they give him their full support. The sorcerer then describes the process. The king must capture a sea monster, whose heart will be used to cure the queen's ailment. A pure, unmarried woman must then prepare the heart, which the queen must eat. The sorcerer assures them that by doing this, the queen will become pregnant. The king immediately agrees and begins preparations to hunt down the sea monster. The next day, the king embarks on his mission to find the sea monster. Fortunately, he locates it in a nearby river. When the monster is sleeping, the king stealthily enters the water and attacks the creature. He stabs the monster with his spear, puncturing its vital organs. However, in the ensuing struggle, the king is thrown aside, severely injured by the creature's angered thrashing. With the creature slain, the king's men cut out its heart and lay it before their ruler. Knowing he has succeeded, the king laughs before succumbing to his wounds. The queen then approaches, cradling the creature's heart in her arms, barely glancing at her fallen husband. Later, a pure and unmarried lady is found in the castle, and she is tasked with preparing the heart. While cooking it, she experiences strange sensations and suddenly becomes pregnant. Shortly after, the queen consumes the heart and also becomes pregnant, bringing hope and joy to the kingdom. In the next scene, both the queen and the maid give birth to their children at the same time, as if they were twins. The queen's son is named Elias, while the maid's son is named Jonah. The story then fast-forwards 16 years, and the boys have grown into young men. Despite being born on the same day, the two boys are almost identical. Their white hair, inherited from the sea monster, symbolizes their shared heritage, and they share a deep and unbreakable bond. They also possess the ability to breathe underwater, just like fish. However, the queen despises their friendship. She informs Elias that, as a prince, he cannot be friends with Jonah, the maid's son. Elias pays no attention to her words and continues his friendship with Jonah. In a subsequent scene, the queen threatens the maid, warning her that if she does not stop Jonah from seeing Elias, both she and her son will be expelled from the kingdom. Despite this, the boys remain undeterred and continue meeting regularly. One day, they play a prank on the queen. Jonah wears Elias' clothes and pretends to be her son, but she quickly sees through the ruse. She overheard them discussing their successful prank. As punishment, she exiles Jonah from the kingdom. A heartbroken Elias tries to stop the exile, but his efforts are in vain. Before leaving, Jonah cuts a tree with a knife, causing water to flow from it. He tells Elias that as long as the water remains clear, he is alive, but if it turns red, his life is in danger. After this emotional exchange, the two friends bid each other farewell, promising to meet again soon. From that day on, Elias regularly checks the tree. For the first few weeks, nothing happens. One day, the water turns red, and Elias realizes that his friend is in danger. Without informing his mother, he leaves the kingdom in search of Jonah. After days of intense searching, Elias still cannot find his friend. He wanders frustratedly through an unfamiliar city where his search has led him. Suddenly, one of the local peasant women recognizes him and joyfully throws herself around his neck. Other villagers gather around and cheerfully welcome him, mistaking him for Jonah. It turns out that during his absence, Jonah had started a family in this town. However, he also discovers that Jonah entered the forest 5 days earlier and disappeared without a trace. Determined to find his friend, Elias sets off to search for Jonah. Meanwhile, in Long Trellis, with her only son missing, the queen returns to the sorcerer for help. Once again, the sorcerer tells her the same thing. To gain a life, she must sacrifice one. Desperate and with no other options, the queen agrees without hesitation. In the forest, Jonah is stranded and injured in a cave, where he is attacked by a flying creature. Hearing Jonah's cries for help, Elias locates him and fights off the creature, eventually killing it. However, what Elias does not realize is that the creature he has slain is his own mother. She had sacrificed herself to save her son, fulfilling the sorcerer's life-for-life pact. In the final scene, Elias ascends to the throne as the new king of Long Trellis, bringing the story to a close. The second narrative begins with a lustful king of the Strong Cliff and 2 elderly sisters. The king is excessively lustful. He leads a promiscuous lifestyle and is constantly surrounded by women who fulfill all his whims. However, he cannot find a special girl worthy of becoming his queen. One day, on his way back to the castle after yet another indulgent night, he hears a beautiful woman's voice humming a melodious song. Fascinated by the sound, the king looks out the window, expecting to see a beautiful girl. Licking his lips in anticipation, he tries to seduce the stranger, eager to possess her as quickly as possible. But she hides her face and hurries back to her house. We are then introduced to the 2 elderly sisters, Dora and Emma, who reside near the palace. Dora is cunning and self-centered, while Emma is frank and sincere. Despite their advanced age and isolated lives, their voices remain remarkably youthful and pleasant to hear. The sisters rarely leave their abode and remain unmarried. Resigned to the fact that they will likely die in confinement, the king arrives outside their house and knocks on their door, hoping to see her in person. The sisters panic, fearing his wrath if he sees their true appearance. Dora devises a cunning plan. She asks the king to return in a week, promising to present him with a small part of her body that showcases her beauty, her finger. Smitten by her voice once again, the king agrees delightfully. In the next scene, the sisters work hard to make their appearances look youthful. Dora tries covering her fingers with herbs, but ends up looking even uglier. Emma, however, has kept her fingers in her mouth for several days, and now they look smooth and youthful. A week later, when the king comes to their home, Dora shows him Emma's youthful fingers, pretending they are her own. To their surprise, the king is instantly smitten, believing he has found the woman of his dreams just from the sight of her hand. But this is not enough. The king demands that the girl reveal herself completely to him. It seems like the time to reveal her secret, but Dora decides to take a bold risk. She proposes a condition to the king. She will agree to sleep with him, only if it is in complete darkness. The king agrees without hesitation. In the next scene, Emma begins tightening Dora's body with glue, hoping to make her appear like a young girl. At midnight, a palace guard arrives to take Dora away as agreed. In complete darkness, Dora reaches the king's chambers and spends a passionate night with him. At dawn, the curious king decides to light a candle and look at the face of the sleeping beauty. To his shock, instead of a beautiful girl, he finds an ugly and wrinkled old woman in his bed. Enraged, he orders his guards to throw Dora out of the window. Fortunately, luck is on her side, and she survives the fall by getting stuck in a tree. Fortune smiles upon the woman once more, and she is discovered in the woods by a wandering sorceress. The sorceress helps Dora to her feet. Feeling pity for the poor old woman, she embraces her, comforting her and putting her to sleep. When the sorceress leaves, she transforms Dora into a stunningly beautiful young lady with long, luscious hair. To forget the unpleasant events of the morning, the king decides to go hunting. He spots the beautiful young Dora and is captivated once again. Believing he has found the woman of his dreams, he brings her to his castle with the intention of making her his queen. Later, The king's servant arrives at Emma's house, handing her a beautiful outfit and an invitation to the royal wedding. The puzzled old lady arrives at the castle, where she is met with astonished looks from the guests. The king and queen appear in the ceremonial hall, accepting congratulations on their wedding. Noticing her sister among the guests, the young Dora takes her to another room and reveals her true identity. Emma is taken aback and asks how Dora became young. Dora sarcastically replies that she peeled off her old skin. Emma believes her claim and visits a blacksmith to peel off her own skin in exchange for a necklace. The blacksmith, being more foolish than Emma, obliges without hesitation. He places Emma in his cart and drives her deep into the woods. Along the way, the old woman cheerfully dangles her feet in anticipation. Having sharpened his weapon, the blacksmith ties her to a tree and proceeds to remove Emma's skin. Sometime later, Emma returned to the castle. All bloodied and weak, she soon passes away, due to the wounds. Even Dora doesn't get a happy ending. As the magic begins to fade, she starts to grow old again. Her skin reverts to her former self, and the second narrative ends as she runs away, never to be seen again. The third story begins in the High Hills Kingdom, where the king is extremely childish and eccentric. While listening to his daughter Violet's musical performance, but he is easily distracted by a flea he discovers on his arm. The tiny parasite jumps from one palm to the other, amusing the man with its tricks, barely waiting for his daughter to finish singing. The king takes the flea to his chambers. He even makes the bizarre decision to keep the parasite in a transparent glass box and feed it with his own blood every day. As time passes, the insect grows larger and more menacing. The king becomes so engrossed with it that he neglects his royal duties and his daughter's well-being. Meanwhile, Violet dreams of having the romantic relationship she has read so much about in love novels. But one day, the beloved parasite falls sick and dies. The next day, the monarch presents Violet with beautiful outfits, finally deciding to marry her off. He announces a grand competition, with the winner earning the honor of marrying the princess. Violet is both excited and apprehensive about the idea, as she had hoped to find love on her own terms. Nevertheless, she agrees to participate, and the news spreads throughout the kingdom. Meanwhile, the king hangs the flea's skin in his palace and promises to marry off his only daughter to the man who can guess which animal it came from. The suitors proceed with the contest, but none of them can identify the insect. Just when it seems as if his daughter will remain unmarried, an ogre arrives at the castle. He also wants to become the king's in-law, and after some hesitation, the king allows him. With just a sniff, he correctly guesses the insect's name. The king looks at his daughter in confusion and apologizes, for he was sure that no one would be able to figure out the mystery of the insect. Realizing that she has to marry an ugly beast, she runs away and attempts to commit the unthinkable. But her father quickly calms her down and convinces her to go through with it. Following this, the ogre forcefully drags the poor girl away and takes Violet to his abode, a cave high up in the mountains. What she sees inside the cave leaves Violet horrified. The floor is covered with raw animal remains. One day, while the ogre is out hunting, Violet sees a woman on another slope gathering herbs. She tells her of her dreadful situation and begs for help. The woman promises to return with backup. The next day, the woman returns with her entire family, wandering acrobats. As they are crossing over the gorge, the giant ogre arrives. In the ensuing pursuit, they manage to escape his rage and cut the rope, causing the ogre to fall into the abyss. Sometime later, the ogre finds the family and brutally eliminates them one by one. He then chases Violet into a cave and starts hugging her passionately. Violet pretends to care, but as soon as he is distracted, she cold-bloodedly slits her horrible husband's throat with a sharp knife. In the final scene, a bloodied Violet returns to her castle with the ogre's severed head in her hand. The sight terrifies everyone, and even the king falls to his knees, asking for forgiveness. Violet simply says,
"Here's the husband you chose for me,"
and begins to cry. Violet is then appointed as the queen of the kingdom. The story, and the entire movie, ends as the young queen gazes up at the sky, where a daring acrobat crosses a fiery rope. Let us know your thoughts about this recap, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications, and leave a like to support the channel. Thank you for watching.